I think Mr. Carney wants to avoid scrutiny. He wants to run during a honeymoon, and the legacy media to protect him from any kind of tough questions or scrutiny, whether it is about the advice he gave Trudeau that tanked our economy over the last 5 years, whether it is about him moving his company headquarters to New York only a few months ago, when that's exactly what President Trump wants.
Well, if you didn't already think that the Liberal leadership race was completely rigged, the NDP accidentally admitted that it is. We have Mark Carney getting massively called out from a lot of different people for being, an out-of-touch idiot demon. And some other news to get through as well. CBC being some woke rejects, the Liberal Party backpedaling on more of their attempts to get your votes. Oh yeah, and it looks like Donald Trump just ended the war in Ukraine in a single phone call. I'm Jasmine Lane. This is Over Opinionated. Subscribe, like, share, comment, give me a follow on other social media platforms as well. And let's get right into this with Donald Trump, Ukraine, Russia, what's going on there?
That we will and have to stand every single day until Ukraine wins this war.
This just in, President Vladimir Zelensky, who we have sent lots of billions of dollars to, says that he will actually agree to meet in person with Vladimir Putin after a common plan is negotiated with U.S. President Trump. This news coming from CTV is where I grabbed this from. It actually says, and I quote, Zelensky believes Trump is key to ending the Russia-Ukraine conflict and said the U.S. president gave him his telephone number before Friday's opening of the Munich Security Conference. Trump upended years of steadfast U.S. support for Ukraine this week following a phone call with Putin.
What's realistic, likely on an outcome? I think realism is an important part of the conversation that hasn't existed enough inside conversations amongst friends. But simply pointing out realism, like the borders won't be rolled back to what everybody would like them to be in 2014, is not a concession to Vladimir Putin. It's a recognition of hard power realities on the ground after a lot of investment and sacrifice, first by the Ukrainians and then by allies.
Now, I'm not going to go into all of the details and theories as to why this conflict first started, but I will tell you, and you can research that on your own, that there was something that the Biden administration did that a lot of other world leaders did that Russia said, you can't do that, and then they did it anyway, that led to all of this and led to how many billions, trillions of tax dollars going into Ukraine and making the Ukrainians very wealthy, among some of the wealthiest people across Europe. There's tons of reports of this. Tucker Carlson talked about this as well not terribly long ago. That's in a previous video. But at the end of the day, I don't really think anybody betrayed Ukrainians more than the allies that pushed and pressured Ukraine to fight a war that they could not win instead of just coming to a peace deal in March of 2022. Those are my thoughts on that regard. And that is something that the Trump administration has been talking about for a very long time. And love Donald Trump or hate him, I think it's safe to say that for many people across the globe whose eyes are open, Donald Trump in just a few weeks has done so much, regardless of the reasoning behind it, that is in fact for the betterment of everyday civilians. I wanted to point you to this because JD Vance, who is the U.S. vice president, has been speaking a lot. And he was just at that AI conference that took place in Paris earlier this week. And here's something else that he had to say, a bit of a warning to other world leaders. Now, will they listen? Who knows? It appeared that Justin Trudeau fell asleep during a good chunk of Vance's speech. But I just want you to listen to this to, again, just really show you what we are up against and compare that to our own governments right now.
They're voting for political leaders who promise to put an end to out-of-control migration. Now, I happen to agree with a lot of these concerns, but you don't have to agree with me. I just think that people care about their homes, they care about their dreams, they care about their safety and their capacity to provide for themselves and their children. And they're smart. I think this is one of the most important things I've learned in my brief time in politics. Contrary to what you might hear a couple mountains over in Davos, I believe that dismissing people, dismissing their concerns, or worse yet, shutting down media, shutting down elections, or shutting people out of the political process protects nothing. In fact, it is the most surefire way to destroy democracy. And speaking up and expressing opinions isn't election interference. Even when people express views outside your own country, and even when those people are very influential. What no democracy, American, German, or European, will survive is telling millions of voters that their thoughts and concerns, their aspirations, their pleas for relief are invalid or unworthy of even being considered. Democracy rests on the sacred principle that the voice of the people matters. There's no room for firewalls. You either uphold the principle or you don't. You can embrace what your people tell you, even when it's surprising, even when you don't agree. To believe in democracy is to understand that each of our citizens has wisdom and has a voice. And if we refuse to listen to that voice, even our most successful fights will secure very little.
Imagine having a leader and a government that speaks to you like that, compared to what we have here in Canada, of course.
I learned how to fight in Windsor, and I bring that fight with me everywhere I go. Right now, Donald Trump's already announced that he's going to bring in steel and aluminum tariffs. So first, on that steel and aluminum tariff, we've got to fight back. We got to punch back with retaliatory tariff. That's step one. We also have to put in place supports for the workers impacted.
Then the Americans we have a significant trade surplus. The Americans have a significant trade surplus with us on steel, which means.
And then for some reason, CBC, funded by the Trudeau government to the tune of $1.2 roughly billion every single year, has the audacity amidst this crisis to invite a guest on their show who says this.
Well, I mean, the continual references to Trudeau as Governor Trudeau, I think, is indicative of the kind of relationship that he thinks of Justin Trudeau. He thinks of him as someone to push around, someone that he doesn't have to give any time of the day to. And I think that that's generally how he treats women. And so I think that if it was Chrystia Freeland, which the polls don't suggest would be, I think that would be in a position in which he would absolutely not treat her with a set of respect. It would be really up to Freeland to be able to make her stand, which is perhaps suggesting why her rhetoric is certainly a lot more stronger than Carney.
Dare I say that if Donald Trump treats Chrystia Freeland poorly, it's because he knows what she has done. He campaigned slamming her and the Trudeau government for what they did to us. And he sees right through her. I don't think it has anything to do with her being a woman. In case you forgot, most of his cabinet picks and, his press secretary are all women. And in fact, every woman speaks very highly of Donald Trump. Did we forget what he just signed to protect women just last week? Everybody speaks very, very positively of him, except for those few women who have paper trails leading back to the Democrats who decided to file charges against him. So, let's just stop with the propaganda already, can we? Is this helpful? Truly. But hey, Canada has really come together now, right? All the same things that conservatives have been screaming off the rooftops, that the liberals have shut down, silenced you, censored you, vilified you over, all of those same things they're apparently on board with. I want to play you a clip of Anita Anand, but first I wanted to show you this. My brother sent me this morning. So it says, Guilbeault pulls pin on $11 billion Kitimat refinery project backed by Stockwell Day. My brother works, I think, or he used to work at the LNG plant that was just down the street from where this one was supposed to be. But essentially, it has been 10 years that this company has been trying to get this project up and running, and mostly due to environmental policies and regulations and bureaucracy, it's been 10 years. And then you have the US as an example, or even somewhere overseas who says, yeah, we'll approve this. You'll start building in a year. Why would anybody do business with Canada? And remember, this is the Canadian government's fault. This is policy and regulations' fault. The thing about this that's really sad, my brother texted me this. He said, What it means for Canada, though, is that we just lost another $11 billion project that would have put billions of dollars into our economy, created thousands of construction jobs, several hundred full-time jobs, all gone. And I'm sure that you'll see this project come up in the States very soon, where they don't take 10 years to put a shovel in the ground because they just approve it and build it.
Absolutely, I say it, and sometimes people smile and sometimes they say great idea, but Canada, their taxes would come down greatly, their security would go up greatly. Amazing things happen to Canada.
But make no mistake, we need to diversify our supply chains so that we are not reliant to the tune of 80% on the U.S. economy. That means opening up supply chains to the Indo-Pacific. We are the only G7 country that has a free trade agreement with every other G7 country. We need to leverage our natural resources and our raw materials so that we can take advantage of those free trade agreements. And then finally, Mike, I'll say on internal barriers to trade, we need to eliminate those. They need to come down so that we can add up to $200 billion to the Canadian economy. We need free trade in our own country, one Canadian economy, not 13, so that we can continue to grow our domestic economy without going through Donald Trump at all.
And here's the part that's very frustrating. The simple fact that every single one of these people knew that this was a problem beforehand. Many times it has been screamed off the rooftops that we need to address these problems. We need to be more independent. But what did the Trudeau Liberals do instead? They continued to cancel things. They continued to raise taxes. They continued to push investment out of this country. And only when Donald Trump threatens to cut us off do they say, here's everything that we need to do. Yeah, we've spent the last 9 years not doing it, but Canada first. Yeah, we got to do this now. And it's incredibly frustrating because my assumption is that Donald Trump doing this is like Donald Trump offering an intervention where he's saying, hey, Canada, you have problems. Here's what they are. I'm more powerful than your government. Fix the problems, right? And that should ideally turn people towards conservatives because those are the people who have been talking about these problems the entire time. But instead, you have the Liberals copying the conservative talking points. You have Parliament prorogued. You have Parliament shut down since September. And you have conservatives just desperately trying to get a voice in the media, which they are not. The media during this period of time is only focused on liberal government and Trump, and the liberal government is using Trump as a way to gain more popularity, and it's absolutely working. Because Trump's calls are only giving Justin Trudeau in this period of time in his government the opportunity to wave their flag high, the opportunity to manipulate, to lie, to pretend as though Canadians have forgotten everything that happened over the last 9 years, which many of them have, will, and do, thanks to the media narrative that's been going around. And this rhetoric from Donald Trump, while very needed, unfortunately, given the time frame, which possibly could have been very intentional with the prorogation, has allowed the Liberals to see a temporary boost and to gain more support and more confidence as the ones to deal with this, while their opponents are shut out through media because there's nothing going on in the House. And no media that's paid by the Trudeau Liberal government is talking about anything other than the Trudeau Liberal government and the Trudeau Liberal leadership race. That's where they are trying to get everybody's heads at right now, not the fact that the Liberals are the ones who put us in this place to begin with.
And one of the things I can say is that, in Ontario, the Premier has decided to call an election at a time where, his energy might be better spent defending Ontario's interests.
That might just be one of the dumbest things I've ever heard in my life. Karina Gould, what are you doing? What are you doing right now? Why are you doing this interview? Oh, right, because your government decided to call an election when perhaps your time may be better spent defending what's in the best interest of Canadians. You decided to run in said election and resign from your position on the cabinet.
I think it will happen quickly. I think Mr. Carney wants to avoid scrutiny. He wants to run during a honeymoon and the legacy media to protect him from any kind of tough questions or scrutiny. whether it is about the advice he gave Trudeau that tanked our economy over the last 5 years, whether it is about him moving his company headquarters to New York only a few months ago, when that's exactly what President Trump wants, whether it's about him opposing Canadian pipelines while buying pipelines in the Middle East, or opposing Canadian energy while investing in American coal. Those are all highly hypocritical things that Mark Carney does not want explored. And so I think he'll want a quick election to avoid any scrutiny. I think it is important we do get a quick election, but let's not mistake the real reason why Carney wants that. It is to avoid any scrutiny and to have the Liberal establishment, the Liberal media, basically rubber stamp him as Prime Minister so that he can go on carrying out the same policies that have destroyed our economy, doubled our debt and housing costs after 9 years of the Liberals.
And here is a little graph to show you just how much Canada has fallen ever since Mark Carney, the outsider, started advising Justin Trudeau in all of his decisions. We're not even getting into all of the Brookfield management projects that got approved during this time. Big conflict of interest there. Also, interest payments on federal debt, thanks to Mark Carney's advice, have soared to $52.9 billion a year, which is actually more than the total health transfers to the provinces. And now Mark Carney says if you just give him more power, he's going to fix it.
And something that my government is going to do is to use all of the powers of the federal government, including the emergency powers of the federal government, to accelerate the major projects that we need in order to build this economy.
You know, this might make you mad. In order to have a thriving economy, all you actually need to do is cut down the bureaucracy, rescind some of your green energy policies, rescind much of your policies, and lower taxes so that businesses want to thrive in this country. You don't need to use emergency powers to ensure that things get built. And it makes you wonder, well, here's a list of 46 renewable energy projects in Canada, many of which were developed in partnership of Brookfield Management and the Liberal government while Mark Carney was an advisor to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Big conflict of interest, obviously.
Carbon tax Carney's failure to provide any transparency to Canadians about his financial interests for half a decade while he's been advising the Carney-Trudeau Liberal government. And there have been if only few questions from the media about how much his megacorp profited while he was advising the government.
But if not one of these 46 projects your corrupt little demon hands was able to push forward and build, managed to save our economy, what exactly is your plan, sir? Because this is all that you care about and it's not working. So, but I guess it doesn't really matter what we think because Mark Carney has been pre-selected for a very long time as per the WEF and their goal, which they have admitted, this is on video, to infiltrate more and more cabinets around the world, which is why Donald Trump is so vehemently opposed to them.
But the NDP have a good hunch that one could start in less than a month. In a letter to NDP candidates and campaign teams that was obtained by CTV News, National Campaign Director Jennifer Howard writes, in part, Donald Trump's continued threats to our sovereignty and to Canadian workers need a strong, united, and immediate response. Nonetheless, Parliament stands prorogued, and no Liberal leadership candidate, including Mr. Carney, has reached out to any opposition leaders to discuss emergency legislation coming to Parliament to deal with Donald Trump's trade war and the impact on Canadians. She continues, we believe the rumors of Mr. Carney calling a snap election are credible. Adding, the Liberals believe that they can turn this crisis into a political benefit for them. I'm asking all campaigns to be prepared for an election call to come as early as March 10th.
I can't be the only person who thinks it's a little odd that the NDP, after hearing Mark Carney say something about calling an election, would go to the lengths to write a letter that they knew was going to be leaked, that's how these things work, saying that they think Mark Carney's statement is credible enough that they need to start preparing their teams for it. Mark Carney is not elected. Mark Carney is not prime minister. He's just somebody running in the campaign. So why would it matter what he said unless they knew, just like the media already knew, which is why they have been operating the PSYOP in the way that they have been, that he was going to win? That's why they aren't saying anything at all that could be disparaging of him. What happened to integrity in journalism? You know, to ask something as simple as, hey, what about these conflicts of interest? Yet our journalists don't ask those questions. Seems kind of odd, doesn't it?
Fentanyl is an absolute crisis in the United States. It's a challenge here, but it's a crisis there. It's a challenge here, but it's a crisis there.
I think Mark Carney sounds incredibly ignorant here. I mean, how many lives does it take for the government to consider something a crisis? And if you don't treat it like a crisis, and in his eyes, if it isn't one, like, are you just going to wait till it is one? Like, it sounds like he's been in his ivory tower for too long. If you walk in any city center, including Toronto, there's people suffering and strung out everywhere.
When you realize that we've had almost 50,000 people die since 2016, that's like wiping out a small town.
I'm Jasmine Lane. This is Over Opinionated. Subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. Follow me on other social media platforms as well. Comment your thoughts, speculations, theories, all of that stuff down below. And also like the video, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.